Molly was born and raised in a small village surrounded by dense forests, away from the hustle and bustle of the big city. The woman was raised by her grandmother, as her parents died in a car crash when Molly was 5 years old. The best entertainment for the child who grew up in the middle of untouched nature was taking long walks in the forest. Together with her grandmother, they often went to pick berries and mushrooms, and sometimes they just wandered down familiar paths, thinking about something of their own, and then pouring it out onto paper in the form of poetry. Molly was very fond of writing, so she chose to study literature at college. Having been accepted to the college of her choice, the young woman devoted herself entirely to her schoolwork, hoping for a career as an editor in the publishing business. Unfortunately, her grandmother passed away 2 years before Molly started college. Therefore, having ended up all alone in this world, Molly promised herself to finish college by any means necessary and achieve success. That day, Holly was sitting with her friends in the college cafeteria. They had some time between classes, so the young woman decided to have a snack. They had 3 more hours of classes that day, so they needed to regain their strength before they started. "Ladies, I have a great idea. Let's go to the countryside this weekend," Samantha offered. She didn't take the same classes as the group of friends. "My boyfriend has a vacation home there, and we'd love to have you join us there over the weekend. He will also bring along some of his friends. It will be fun. What do you say?" The offer seemed unexpected but very tempting, especially since the young woman hadn't gone anywhere in a long time. "Why not? The weather is wonderful. Why spend the weekend stuck in the dorm?" Holly said. "Should we bring anything?" "No, that's fine," Samantha clapped her hands happily. "Just bring your beautiful selves and a nice mood. I'll give you all the details later, like the meeting point and time, but now I have to run. I'm late for my class." But something made Holly feel uneasy. Maybe we shouldn't have accepted her invitation. We don't really know Samantha all that well, let alone her boyfriend and his friends. "Oh, come on," her friend was getting angry. "Why do you always have to bring everyone down? Such a spontaneous weekend away would do you some good. You've been spending way too much time with your books and notes. You will survive one weekend without them, and meeting some new people is definitely a good thing. So no objections will be accepted. We're going, and that's the end of the conversation." After the convincing speech of her friend, Holly had no choice but to agree to go on this trip. But she would soon regret her decision. The spring night was warm and quiet. The clouds shrouded nature in a gray twilight. As the night was slowly descending over the lake, Holly moved through the forest like a wounded animal and couldn't understand how much time had passed since she had run away from that big country house. It was getting dark quickly, and soon the woman couldn't see anything around her. Holly made her way through the dense thickets of bushes and trees while the thorny branches painfully lashed at her face. And while Holly was hoping that she'd have enough strength to get to some neighboring village or at least to the nearest highway and get some help, she was still very worried about the fate of her friends who stayed behind with those awful people. With each passing second, Holly got more and more convinced that she'd have to spend the night right here in the middle of the forest. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her legs stopped obeying her. The young woman fell down near some bushes, exhausted, when suddenly she saw a yellow light in the darkness, flashing between the branches of the trees. "Oh my God, it must be a flashlight. Some people must have finally found me," Holly thought, unable to stop worrying that it could be those same bastards from the lake house. Now Holly couldn't help but regret that she didn't insist that they should stay home, since she was wary of the situation from the very beginning. And now it turned out that she was right. Holly pressed into the bush, hiding and waiting to see who it was. She could no longer see the light, but she didn't know if she should be sad or happy about it. The young woman stretched her legs forward, closed her eyes, and relaxed for a little bit. Suddenly, something cold and wet touched her hand. Holly almost screamed in surprise. She was horrified and tried to push herself further into the bush. There were 2 yellow lights next to the woman. Those were the eyes of a predator. The wolf started carefully sniffing Holly. Meanwhile, the young woman was already saying goodbye to her life in her head. She couldn't believe that she managed to escape the human attackers, only to be attacked by a wild animal. Nothing happened for a bit. The wolf kept sitting near the woman and didn't make any attempts to attack her. Then, suddenly, the animal got up and pulled Holly's coat, trying to get her to walk with her. Holly wasn't afraid of the animal anymore. She realized that the wolf was thus inviting her to follow her. She calmly got up and walked after the predator. Very soon, she saw some lights glimmering in the distance. She started walking faster, afraid to lose her guide. Holly didn't even pay attention to the branches that were scratching her hands and face. Coming closer, the woman saw a small hunting lodge. She timidly knocked on the window and froze in anticipation, wondering who could be living there. The door opened, and a stately young man came out. Seeing the wolf along with a young woman, he said, "Dory, did you find people lost in the forest again?" "So that's not a wolf, but a dog?" Holly asked. "No, it's a wolf. A she-wolf, actually. Don't be afraid. She's tame. She won't harm you." "Rather the opposite," the man said, and gestured for the woman to come inside the house. Holly burst into tears and asked for help. She explained that she'd come to the house on the lake with a group of her friends and 3 young men. When the men got drunk, they started pressuring the woman into doing things they didn't want to do. That's when Holly decided to run away. "It's a good thing that Dory found you in time and brought you to me. My name is Henry. I'm the local forester. I represent the authorities here." The man introduced himself, removing his gun from the wall hook. "Let's go. I know this lake house. That rich kid from the city often brings people there, and many of them already have a criminal past. You better stay here. Warm up and we'll be back soon." Sure, the woman was very cold after all. She was only wearing a sundress and a coat, but she couldn't stay behind. She had to help her friends. "I'm going with you. I can't just sit here while my friends are in danger." Holly was firm in her decision, so the young forester didn't even see the point to trying to object. They soon reached the unfortunate house. Seeing the wolf and the strong man with a gun, the young men didn't even attempt to fight back and let the man tie their hands. Dory grabbed one of them by the collar of his shirt with their teeth and held him tightly, making it clear that it wouldn't be wise to make any sudden moves. Then the predator sat down next to the men to guard them until the arrival of the police, in case they would try to escape. Fortunately, they didn't have time to fulfill their intentions. They were too drunk and thus poorly coordinated. Holly's friends were found locked in a room, but completely unharmed. When they were let out of the room, the men were handed over to law enforcement agents. Henry suggested that Holly should stay behind for a bit to have breakfast with him in his hut. He promised to be on his best behavior and tell her some interesting stories. Dory put her head in Holly's lap and enjoyed being scratched behind the ear, while the young woman chatted about everything in the world, savoring oatmeal with scrambled eggs. "So how did you tame the predator?" Holly asked the young forester over breakfast. "Please tell me. I'm sure it's a fascinating story. I've never seen or heard anything like that in my life, even though I grew up in a village." "It happened a few years ago, during winter," Henry began his story. "I was just appointed forester in this territory, and I was doing a tour of the area, sweeping snowdrifts with my feet. Approaching the lake, I heard a pitiful whine. The pup took a few steps on the fragile ice crust and fell into the water. It was holding onto the surface with the last of its strength. The situation made me very uncomfortable. I knew it was a small predator, but I also realized that its mother must have been somewhere nearby, and an adult she-wolf might not have liked to see a human come near her pup. But time went by, and the pup was getting exhausted, so I knew I had to do something. Forgetting all the precautions, I began to crawl towards the poor fellow. The ice was very thin, making occasional cracking sounds under the weight of my body. But luckily, I managed to get to the pup and rescue it from the trap. That's how the wolf cub settled in my house. Later, I realized it was a female and named the animal Dory. The she-wolf grew up near me and grew very attached to me. Now she spends more time walking in the forest, but she never forgets to come by for a visit. And when she saw you in trouble, she came to your rescue. Even the most terrifying animals are often kinder than a lot of people."